Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's fourth episode of Song Stories. This time around, we're going to talk about Kenny Loggins' first song, The House on Pooh Corner. The reason this is a story is, apart from it being his first song, it was the song that almost never got recorded. Loggins wrote this as a 17-year-old high school student approaching graduation. And he says that House on Pooh Corner was the first book he ever read. And the idea of leaving childhood, entering adulthood, as Christopher Robin does at the end of House on Pooh Corner, saying goodbye to childhood friends, saying goodbye to childhood to a certain degree, kind of reminded him of the situation that he found himself in at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen Kenny Loggins look worse.
This is Kenny Loggins. This is young Kenny Loggins, mid 1960s. Kenny Loggins, born in 1948. Grew up in a household where, he really admired his brother Dan, who was a musician. And Loggins, at several points, has talked about how influential his brother was. And he really wanted to copy sort of everything about him, including his musicianship. And so when you talk about Loggins coming kind of to the end of the road of childhood, I mean, this puts us, in mid 60s in California. And he has talked about how, again, not only was this the first song he's written, but it's also basically all he knew on the guitar. About every chord that he had mastered at this point was thrown into this song. So there's, I think there's a lot of emotion for Loggins himself with this song. This isn't just any song. This is sort of the song that launches his career, and also I think sort of launches adulthood for him in an interesting sort of way. Yeah.
Anyway, he's already convinced at this point that this is what he wants to do. He wants to be a singer-songwriter.
That's right.
And so he starts attending regular meetings of a songwriters group. And apparently this is a thing that it's a thing we see again and again, people collaborating and working loosely together in groups like this. But at one of these groups, he meets some of the members of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band who are just starting off as a band.
Right.
And he played his song, and they said, "You know what? I think we'd like to record that on our first album." I said, "Yeah, great. Do it." And so he was all excited because he was going to get his first song published. It was going to be on an album.
Oh, yeah.
And then a couple months later, he gets a call from the band. They say, "Well, we're really sorry, man. We're not going to be able to record this because we got a cease-and-desist letter from the Disney lawyers, and they've just been all over us about this. So as much as we'd like to, we're going to have to take a pass." And naturally, he was extremely bummed out about that. So on a date that he was on that night with his girlfriend, apparently that came across that he was not
right.
Well. So she asked, what's up? And he said, "Well, my song, that I thought they were going to record, they're not going to be able to because the Disney lawyers aren't going to allow it." And she said, "The Disney lawyers? Let me talk to Daddy."
Let me talk to Daddy.
So
yeah.
Who was his girlfriend, Steve? Why
his all right. So here we go. Yeah. So the young woman in question is Marnie Walker, daughter of Edmund Card Walker, who was a chief executive at the Disney Corporation. And Card Walker was essentially running the show at Disney. And Card Walker was, what's interesting about Card Walker's career at Disney is that he was the first well, really sort of non-family member to head up Disney. So Walt, of course, the founder. When Walt passed, then um, the Disney Corporation went into the hands of Walt's brother Roy, and then Roy's handed it over to Card Walker. Card Walker is a really interesting figure in the history of Disney. And so, if we could just for a second, this is again sort of mid to late '60s at this point. Disney World in Florida has been underway, operating quite successfully for about a decade at this point. Disney had made that transition to television in the late 1950s, and the Wonderful World of Disney was much see TV on Sunday nights on NBC. In addition, of course, Disney had long had a stable of films, and so they were an entertainment giant. What Card Walker did, though, was he helped the transition in Florida and the opening of Disney World. And the main thing that Card Walker did was he put the time, energy, and a lot of money behind Walt Disney's Epcot dream. And he really is, I think, for people who pay attention to the Disney history, Card Walker is the person most responsible for really sort of putting the energy behind Epcot. Card Walker started at Disney as a kind of messenger, as a kind of runner between buildings. He was sort of human email or texting as messages were being delivered from one Disney building to the next. He was an intense young man, somebody almost with a photographic memory. And so Card Walker made his way up through the corporation largely because he was able to hang on to facts. He really understood the business, and he had this incredible recall, and he gained the trust of Walt in particular. And it's interesting about Card Walker is that his reputation was as a hardworking and as solid a guy who ever worked in the Disney Corporation. Come to work early, 5:30 in the morning. He would be, at his desk and all of this. Nobody ever outworked Card Walker, but he was a loyal and trusted and a decent guy. And people loved him. And old timers would talk about Card Walker in the same kind of terms that they would talk about Walt himself. He was just, they loved him, and he had a certain kind of aura that surrounded him. He was, though, incredibly unhip. And so in the 60s, right, and into the early 70s, when the culture is exploding, Disney is still, Disney is not at the forefront of cultural change.
And Disney was a real like an air brake for cultural change. I mean, they did not go with the flow at all, and it took them years to catch up. But okay, fine.
Yeah, it did take them years, and it's actually well past Card Walker's era, where Disney then became more at the vanguard of what was happening culturally. But the thing about Card Walker was that he was a loyal steward, but a decent guy. And he's the kind of person that if you approached with a song, if his daughter, he'd listen. He'd give it a fair hearing. And he had a kind of sentimental soft spot. I don't know if there's any question about that. I mean, people talked about how much Card Walker loved, everything that was Disney, and that something spoke to him in a way that seemed true and honest. He was sort of all in. And so in a scenario, so let me go talk to Daddy, Marnie Walker suggests it was, a number of things sort of came together. And in fact, it was Card Walker who was I think it opened a door in a way that another CEO, it just he wouldn't have probably been as receptive. Now, the other question about this, Dave, is that how do you date a woman whose dad is the chief executive at Disney? You don't know anything about it. That's sort of the unanswered question all these decades later. But we'll just take that at face value. But they have they have the meeting. Now, part of what we want to get to here is it's complicated, right? Because the Winnie the Pooh franchise is It's beloved at this point. It's also incredibly lucrative. And there's all sorts of kind of legal angles and copyright questions that have to be addressed here.
Well, why does Disney even have anything to say
Yeah,
about copyright?
that's an excellent question.
That's an A. Milne book. He has the literary copyright. And in England, although he passed in 1956 and his copyright passed with him, it's still the copyright to the book still existed, and it was passed along to four separate entities.
Right.
And they owned the literary copyright in England. However, in 1930, the North American merchandising and recording rights to Winnie the Pooh were bought by a certain Stephen Schlesinger.
Yeah, it's just...
Schlesinger was he was a maker and a shaker. Was involved in film, radio, comics, TV,
right.
the whole nine yards. He'd done stuff with Tarzan, with Buck Rogers, and so on.
Yeah,
And
a man of his time. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and once he got this copyright, he even sold the Winnie the Pooh rights to Milton Bradley for a board game, and that's the first time. This is the first time that we see Winnie the Pooh in a red shirt.
There we go. So this is it. Okay, so this is so interesting. Yeah, thank you. That's really good. So you have the original creation, right, of Milne with his son, the Christopher Robin. I mean, all this is actually sort of born from kind of experience, father son, father overhearing his child, with this kind of fantasy.
Yeah.
From there, then you have books, you have illustrations, you have intellectual property, you have then copyright purchases, you have then pushing into new areas like this game, which then changes some of the features of Pooh himself, which then are kind of become part of the Pooh legacy. I mean, there's just all this stuff is happening at a pretty rapid rate, and this is before Disney's even involved.
Well, and the thing about the Disney involvement is so much of the Disney film, and this was the same with Alice in Wonderland. The Disney animators were largely inspired by the original illustrations.
Yes,
in this case
good.
by E.H. Shepard. And those illustrations have copyrights of their own, but there's no indication that they actually acquired those. Anyway, but what they did acquire in 1961 from Schlesinger's widow was the copyrights, the 1930 copyrights for North America. Yeah, and so from 1961 on, Disney owned the Winnie the Pooh copyrights, and that's where the trouble began, and the trouble ended, as you suggested, with a meeting that Marty set up with her father and Kenny Loggins, who went and sat on the floor in their house and played the song. Played the song for him, and he made a call and said, "Guys, let him have it." It's Loggins says, maybe
so many things. Yeah,
it's not going to go anywhere anyway. It's not going to do anything. I mean, it's certainly not going to hurt our bottom line. So let him have it.
So to that point, okay, so let's let him have it. So to that point, so we should talk for a second, Dave, about where Pooh at this point in the '60s stands in sort of the kind of the pantheon of culture and for young people. So it's fair to say, right, it's a simpler world in the 1960s that it's a smaller world in terms of the things that are available, and there are certain figures, certain stories, certain kinds of books and films that are a cut above. And I think it's fair to say that Pooh and the Hundred Acre Wood in the 1960s is as close to. I mean, it's amongst the most important things for young people in the United States as it exists, right? That there's something about these uh, featurettes that Disney created in the 60s, these small films that would initially play in theaters before feature films from Disney, then would be play on A Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night, and then would be put together into their own feature. That they were a beloved part of childhood for kids, well, maybe across the world, but certainly in the United States. It's
Well,
a
and the other
big
thing
deal.
is,
Yeah.
in the mid to late 60s, we're also talking about something that, without any um, consideration on the part of Disney, it certainly was not something that was contemplated and planned. But there was a lot going on in Hundred Acre Woods that really had some hippie vibes in terms of
Yes,
how we
absolutely.
deal with each other and things like that. And
That's right.
so uh, the youth, not just the kids, but the youth as well, were drawn to these features.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, in the kinds of challenges that everybody was facing in the Hundred Acre Wood, I mean, there were parallels to what was happening in large society, and there was a sense that was almost kind of Eden. That there was that there was something about this place that was pure, that was beautiful. Nobody wants to leave it. And so there's just you've got all this stuff swirling about. I mean, I think that Loggins really, in his own sort of way, I think kind of tumbled into something that was really kind of bigger than himself, and I think bigger than he ever had than he ever could have imagined. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about the cultural piece of this. There was something about in the air, the zeitgeist that just made this. Yeah, there's something about this story that just people really connected to.
Well,
No question about it.
and from there, it just got bigger and bigger.
Oh yeah.
This franchise became huge. At one point, Winnie the Pooh oversold Mickey Mouse merchandising in Disney stores.
This is I remember this. So yeah, I think that that's absolutely the case. And that's from as I remember my childhood. Pooh was very important. Pooh was Mickey Mouse seemed distant. I mean, Mickey Mouse seemed distant, but Pooh seemed to sort of speak to a kind of childhood reality that people kind of really connected to. I mean, you have the films, but with Pooh voiced by Sterling Holloway. You have the merchandising. There's just a lot of things happening here that I think, in an odd sort of way, in this era, Pooh's the face of Disney.
Yeah,
it's not Mickey Mouse; it's Pooh.
Anyway, so to make a short story long,
yes.
This encounter, the fact that he happened to be dating the right girl, even though he supposedly knew nothing about the Disney connection, enabled him to actually publish the song, let other people sing it, and when he got together with Messina, their first album had the house on Pooh Corner. They sang there, and it's one of the perennial favorites for any Kenny Loggins concert.
Well, it is. No,
yeah,
definitely is, Dave. But it's interesting. The song, right, appears on with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Appears on the same album as Mr. Bojangles, and so okay. So and then so that's the 70s, 71. Then the first Loggins and Messina album, sitting in House on Pooh Corner, appears. Not single, but it appears. That album is hugely successful, and the Loggins and Messina pairing was really, really a big deal in the early 1970s. And it's suddenly, I mean, it's
not the big deal for the person that it was supposed to be, but
well, this is the other piece of all this too. It wasn't well. So Messina's on contract.
Messina needed a vehicle, essentially.
He needed a vehicle. Well, he was under pressure because he hadn't delivered anything he was under contract, and he was turning down figures to work with, including one young Dan Fogelberg, who apparently, in a early meeting with Messina, said that he really was looking to kind of spark a sound that sounded a lot like this new band Poco, a band that Messina started and then fled very, very quickly. Eventually, though, he's paired with Loggins, um, kind of against Messina's will in a way. It's an odd thing. Messina was to work as Loggins' producer. There was a kind of chemistry there. They ended up being kind of built as a duo, and then this is where this first the Sitting In album, where House on Pooh Corner appears, and then from there, they have a kind of a small career as a kind of folk rock duo, which in their own way they were quite popular.
Right.
But Messina was never very excited about it.
Well, I think there had to be a certain element of resentment to the fact that he was eclipsed almost from the beginning
Well,
by Loggins, who was who did the singing, the songwriting, and was just kind of a better looking guy. I mean, he was just a very attractive, and he was always the one in front, and Messina and behind his shoulder or something like that. If you see pictures.
Well, even the name. It's a curious thing, and Loggins, who has written an autobiography of the past year or so and done a lot of interviews, has talked a little bit about this relationship, which was a tricky one. They split in the mid 1970s, only to reform some 25, 30 years later. It's it's an odd pairing. What's interesting is that from a distance, people had no sense of any kind of tension, and so people really bought into the sort of Loggins and Messina vibe. And not only were their singles modestly popular, but their albums were very popular, and they were particularly popular on FM radio. Songs tended to kind of meander, and so long songs on FM radio in the early 1970s were very popular with DJs. But it's what's interesting about the Pooh Corner song is there's just lots of curious things that are sort of interspersed. First song, dating a woman who was not, you didn't know who her dad was, being paired with a producer who was maybe not all that excited about working with you. With all that, you have this kind of really fascinating story, and really quite a fetching and charming song that has not lost any of its luster over the decades.
Yeah, so that's basically it. That's our song story for this time around. Popular and lovely song that just almost never saw the light of day.
That's right.
If you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you did, you can subscribe to the channel right here. One thing you'll want to be sure to do is listen to our playlist. We're going to have this and a few other Kenny Loggin songs on the list. And if you want to watch another one of our song stories, you can do that right here.
Absolutely. So until next time, we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.